All right, welcome back to A Piece of Her. I am so excited about today. Today is going to be absolutely unfiltered and uncut. I am in the studio with my producer who is going to be doing some gunshot rounds of questions on today. We're going to be jumping into A Piece of Her as the author. And I am going to share with you some information today about my latest book, The Architect's Playbook, Leadership Strategies for Planning and Impact. So let's get into it. I'm going to just welcome on my producer. What you're going to do is you're going to hear his amazing voice, fire off some questions, and so we're going to get right into it.
Dr. LaToya, can you explain why you wrote The Architect's Playbook?
Absolutely. I wrote The Architect's Playbook as a follow-up to my first book that I wrote, Help My Business is Holding Me Hostage. And in that book, I told my story in terms of what it is like to journey through entrepreneurship with experiencing burnout, loss of identity, just a general sense of just loss of control. And I honestly did that too as a follow-up even to my dissertation on the entrepreneurial experience of business loss. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to speak to entrepreneurs who suffer in silence, who have struggle on the inside. I always say that there's always a story beyond what you see. And so sometimes there's so much pressure to perform that it creates a lot of different stress. And so that book really spoke to entrepreneurs in general. The Architect's Playbook was a follow-up, I would like to say, to marketplace leaders and those who are called to represent Christ in the marketplace. And so one of the things that's absolutely amazing about the Architect's Playbook as to why it's a follow-up is because throughout my struggle of what I shared in Help My Business is Holding Me Hostage, one thing that book does not share is that I found Jesus in my business. So it was not in a traditional setting, it was not in a traditional church, but it was just from going through all of the challenges and the stress and the pressure where I eventually found myself on my knees crying out to God because I knew that I had basically took on everything myself. So I thought that my identity was based on having a PhD. I thought it was based on having a business and just, being well connected or whatever that may look like. I looked at it from that standpoint and I thought it was just all on me. So all of the pressure to perform, it was my responsibility. But somewhere along the line, I found myself crying out to Christ because I couldn't handle it anymore. And so one of the things that I did not share in the initial book was finding Jesus. And the Architect really speaks to those faith-based believers who are in the marketplace and they need a blueprint and they need a pattern of how to perform and navigate, whether it be pressure, navigating teams, knowing, first of all, which we're going to get in today, first of all, knowing who you are, not in a system, not in an agency, not in an organization, not in a degree, but knowing who you are in Christ before you even start. And that is so important. So that's why I did that. I did that because I felt as though I made a promise to God that if he would get me out of what I was enduring in that hard place of suffering in business, that I would be a voice to entrepreneurs who sat and suffered silently and did not know what to do. And so that is the Architect's Playbook is the answer to that.
Wow. That is absolutely phenomenal. And thank you for sharing that. When you hear the word architect, right? What image or feeling comes to your mind? And how does that connect to you and how you see yourself as a leader?
That's a great question. So when I think about the architect, I think about two things. I think about the visionary. So I think about the one who has been giving a divine plan, a divine strategy. to building something. And I often say that it may not be particularly a business, but what is the vision for your family? What is the vision for your children's future? What is the vision for you on your job? Maybe you're not in the business. Maybe you're not an entrepreneur. I often say that you can be totally an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is the person that shows up in the marketplace and you come with all of the creative ideas and innovation, and you bring so much life to that agency that you work for. You may have vision as a school teacher, and you are building the lives of children whom which you serve. You may have vision as the mayor of your city. And so whatever sphere or whatever place, a domain that you lead from, you must have vision. And so I think about the architect having vision, but that the architect is bold enough to build what he or she sees.
Wow. Wow. Man, already so fire. Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. LaToya. And just to follow up with that, how would you say you connect with that yourself as a leader, that visionary piece?
That's another great question. So as a visionary, I am one that really is, I consider myself to be very futuristic. So being very much a person, I would say, that's dreamy, a person that likes to envision, a person with foresight, and then just one that can lay out a pattern of, oh, this is a blueprint, this is a great plan, this is a great process, this is systems. I always talk about different things in business. Sometimes we get really frustrated in just a very transparent moment. Now, just where I'm in a state where business may not be thriving the way I want it to, but sometimes that's because it may be maybe a hindrance or a breakdown in the system. And so as an architect, you're able to identify where systems are broken, systems are not existent, systems are out of place. And then what you do is, through vision and foresight, you're able to create systems and patterns that you can put into play. And so personally, I see myself as that individual that can create. And so having a very unique ability to create and be very creative, and then being bold enough to build. Now, to be honest with you, I would say a bold architect is going to be able to say, I see the plan, I caught that vision, and I'm going to go after it, and I'm going to lead. And then there's sometimes people like myself where I might be over analytical. I don't know how many of y'all can agree with me on that, that sometimes we overthink, we over process the vision and the plans that we've been given, especially by God, instead of just trusting the plan, trusting the vision that he's put on the inside of you, and then making a choice, because it is a choice. You can stay dreamy, and you can stay in the clouds, and you can stay right in the blueprint and the plans. You can keep them journals. How many of you have about 5 or 10 journals of stuff that you have written for the last 3 or 4 years, but you have failed to move on it? And I've been there too, so this is no judgment. I know we in that society where we listen and we don't judge. So I'm listening, I'm not judging, but I am challenging you to think about how important it is to not just write the vision and make it plain to others so that they can get excited about what God has called you to do, whether it be in your region, whether it be in your community, whether it be in your city, it might be in your state, it may be across the nation, but what has he called you to do? But not getting stuck. So when you talk about that question of where do I see myself, I see myself as a person that can visualize and be very futuristic and come up with goals. But sometimes I guess it depends on how I feel. Have you ever find yourself just like you in a place where it's like, I'm excited and I caught the vision and I'm good with this and I'm off and I'm running. And then there's other times where it's just like, okay, I see it, I got it, but I just don't feel like it, right? And so it's just that constant battle with, how do you execute? And so executing the vision, right? Because you can dream up these plans all day long, but how do we get it out there and do it with strategy and doing it with planning? Because at the end of the day, we don't want to just do just to do. I had to learn that the hard way. Like, okay, are you just out here just doing stuff? Or now I'm in that season of, we talked about the season of the soft girl era, all these different seasons, right? Now it's a season of being very impactful. How do I take those visions, those plans, those strategies, but now make an impact and be very impactful and not just busy. Because, sometimes I've been there too, right? I've been a Martha too, where you just super busy, 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 busy. But you have to ask the question, am I being impactful? And so that's a tough question to ask yourself too. So,
Wow. Wow. I mean, a lot of gems in what you just said, especially about that execution. That's kind of what I was hearing you talk about in that visionary piece, that it's okay to, dream and stay in the clouds, but that execution really matters as well. When you talk about in the excuse me, leading with purpose, how do you see yourself doing that in this current season in your life?
I see that with being very intentional about the projects that I'm working on, intentional about the people that I'm connected to and what we're collectively working on. And so leading with purpose is, first of all, knowing what you've been purposed to do. So you have to understand that first, so there was a part of my life or a part on my journey where if someone showed up and they said, LaToya, you should do this at the soup kitchen. Okay, I'm there. Put on my superwoman cape and I'm off to the soup kitchen. Or you should go to the shelter and do this. Okay, yep, you said that too. You should do this. You should do all of these different pieces. It was like, yeah, I'm gonna go, right? So in that sense, there was no really defined purpose. It was just like, okay, you're good at doing all these different things. God had to bring me to a point where I began to speak to those individuals and say, you know what? That ain't what I'm called to do. He didn't call me to do this, because I had eventually had to find what he had purposed me to do and then stand in that specific sphere. And that's been a journey in itself, to understand that you are really a cycle breaker and a legacy maker that focuses on people who are breaking cycles within their families. Being a first generation college student for my immediate family, being able to break out of that box and be able to pass that on to the next generation and say, go, that's cycle breaking. Being able to come in and say, not just because sometimes we got this thing, well, this person was handed this and that. Well, as a person that's called to create legacy, of course, that's what we're there to do. You are there to create legacy and you pass it on. It's not as much as about who gave you what. It's about whether or not you're the person who can sustain what was passed on to you so that it could catapult its way into the future. And so that is so critical in this time. So I'm hoping I answered your question, because I get very passionate about this, and I'll be around the block.
No, you definitely answered the question. I think wow, just so many gems already. In the book, you talk about blending faith, vision, and strategy. Which one of these three feels most natural to you, and which one stretches you the most?
Okay, good question. Blending faith,
vision, and
vision,
strategy.
and strategy. Faith, vision, and strategy. I'm gonna say I am most comfortable with vision, because I love to create and I love to dream and I love to just come up with different ideas. I love the creative part of things. I would say number 2 would be strategy, because I would come up with, the approach of, how do I do this? So being very intellectual, I can lay this out and see how the parts work. And in my mind, I can see like, okay, this is going to work this way. This is going to work this way. This is going to work this way. But I'm going to say, because I'm being very transparent and honest with you, there's some things it's just like, I'm getting to this point now where I can not just say it because it's a cliche, but we all hear like, if it's not big enough, then, then we know that it's going to be God when it's just so big that you say, I can't do this. I'm getting to that point now where it's just like, not that, oh, that's too big, I'm not going to touch it. Well, that was the lack of faith, So there are some people who just have just this gift of faith where they can see something, they can come up with the plan, the strategy, and they like, I believe so much wholeheartedly about this, I'm getting ready to run with it. I'm going to take, we call that in the marketplace, risk takers, right? And so, I believe because I don't know if anyone's familiar with the entrepreneurial strengths finders. They measure you on different strengths. Well, my number one strength is delegation. I believe risk taking was like literally like number 8, and so it was lower on that risk. But when when I looked at this, it really did make me question. Oh, that's your faith level. Your ability to like. I don't see how all of this is gonna work. I don't see it, but I believe what I don't see is going to come into existence, right? And so that just being very, very transparent. Sometimes when you're a dreamer, you will dream some stuff that's way out of this world. And it's like, oh, I don't see how that can happen. Wow. But now it's like, that's a part of the journey with help my business holding me hostage. Moving to a point from thinking that you're the one who has to make it all work, to knowing that it's not you that's going to make it work. God is going to give you, if we just stay connected and stay focused on him, that he gives us the ability to make it work. And that's what we have to understand. But sometimes it's like, ooh, that could get a little challenging too when you think about it from that angle. Taking those leaps, I'm also going to add this to you too, is that taking those leaps for me has now went from I've made some calls. I was so excited because I have been a person that when I see these visions and dreams, because in the marketplace, you are trained and just having an undergrad in business management, of course we have competition. We're trained to have the competition. So that can sometimes isolate you, and the whole idea of collaboration. You don't want to collaborate because it might be that I might give you some insight on this project, and then if it don't work out, or maybe you got the capital and I don't, and now I didn't share this with you, because I've had that happen to me. Like you give an idea, you share this, and you have to watch. Like you gotta be careful. But not so dependent on. But you gotta be careful with who you're connected with and who you're collaborating with and what you are sharing. Sometimes we get so excited about what God has put upon our heart that sometimes that ends up in the wrong hands with the wrong people. And so part of that faith now is having faith to collaborate, because understanding that God is going to get the work done, but you're going to have to collaborate with some others. So I got excited because last week I was reached out and made some calls because I have this huge vision, and I have came to the point that this is not going to happen just with you and you alone, that you're going to have to partner and you're going to have to work with some other people. And it was absolutely amazing because when I made that phone call, that person was like, I know that this is God because he's been telling me to do the same thing, and that I need to get connected with other people as well too. And so let's talk about this further. So now we have to just make sure that we don't keep our selves in the clouds and with 15 notebooks about what we've seen, because chances are between the both of us we probably about 30 notebooks on the project. So it's at the point where it's just like, let's just come together and just do the work.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. LaToya, I mean, you are just really on fire right now. I mean, this is really good information and feedback. My next question for you is, kind of with everything that you shared, I'm hearing themes of vision, execution, leadership. Can you think of a leader with over 20 years, of leadership yourself that you would say encompasses that of an architect?
That is a great question. That is a great question. I would say one that I really aspire and I look to is Dr. John Maxwell. I look to him, and specifically because I see him, and that's the journey that I feel like God has really called me in, building individuals and helping people to launch into their purpose. And that's why we talked about earlier, like being intentional with your purpose. Like you have to get to a point, or else you will be all over and scattered. I have lived that many years of being scattered. But I would say that I really admire him because he's doing exactly what I feel God has called me to do. Which is I'm seeing him as a pastor, but he's showing up in the marketplace and he's working with so many different types of people. And he's able to somehow integrate his faith in and still let people know that he isn't able to do all of the things that he does without God and without Christ. So I would say just seeing him as a giant of a person, of a leader that has built other leaders, because I mean I've shared quite often too, is just a person being called to leaders. I feel like that's something that I'm called to raise up young leaders, but then yet still in such a way called to help leaders in such a unique capacity as well. And I see him doing that on such a broad and a global level that, yes, that's definitely someone that I would look up to.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. You say in the book, leaders should design for impact, not just activity. You touched on that a little bit already. Do you mind elaborating on that? And how do you tell the difference in that work?
Yeah, I think that leaders have to make sure that we don't just become, and I had to learn this, so I'm not talking to something that I heard, I'm talking about something that I've lived out, which is that when we don't know our purpose, we do get caught up in the busy work. Because so it's not all bad just because you're trying to find your way. I work as a coach for human service students. Human services is such a broad scope, it's such a broad field, so that you have to kind of explore a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, right? And so you're out exploring, and that's wonderful, and you're trying to figure it out. And I like to say it's much like that, finding your purpose. Like, I'm over here, but sometimes we are just going and we lose sight of is that I'm not just doing, but I'm becoming. So I'm on a journey to becoming. So don't lose sight of your journey of becoming who you are and get caught up in the busy work, in the doing. And I found myself at some point in that space too. And so it brings me to the point of the impact, I would say, even within the last 3 or 4 years. Like, okay, is this project or this particular thing that you are doing or performing, whatever that may be, is it bringing impact? How many lives are being changed? Where do you see the growth in individuals? Where have you saw families being transformed? And I would like to say, as a person that's younger, you just get caught up in, oh, I did this and I was over here and it's almost the self gratification. But once you get to a point where you understand who you are and who you were created and what you were created to do and be, then it's more or less like, oh, it's less about me. It's not about me, looking a certain way and feeling good about what I do, but it's about, well, how many people can you serve and how are lives being transformed and changed? And when you sit back and see, like, I had a really good friend, she explained it to me like this. She says, you get to a point where you've planted so many seeds in the garden, and you sit back, and some seasons you just have to sit back and just watch and look at how many have bloomed and blossomed. And they did it on their own. So you can't take credit. I don't take credit for that, but just knowing that, somewhere along the journey that you have influenced or impacted, lives, and that it's not just that individual's life, but once they have transformed, and if they have children, that impacts their children, that impacts their children and their children. If it's a business, it's impacting many people. So you have the ability to just really, really have such great impact, just not on maybe the 50 people that you serve, but then you multiply that by how many people are they now going to impact. And so I think once you are able to be intentional about pulling back and saying to yourself, like, hey, is this all, what is this, where is this taking me? What is this, who is this benefiting? Whose lives are changing? What's happening here? That is when you know that you're in it now for impact. And I think that's a phase, right? Because for me, I guess I got to speak for me. For me, it was like, how do I get out here? I want to get out here and get connected. I want to do all of this stuff I do, but I didn't know my purpose. So it had me spinning all over. And those are all wonderful experiences for anybody who may be at that point right now. You may be at a point where you're exploring, and that's great. But what I'm saying is that eventually on your journey, you come to a point where you're like, okay, this is who I was created to be, and this is what I'm called to do. And now I'm on this new journey of now becoming all of that. and being very intentional about impact.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. I mean, that's really, really good. That's really, really good. And it's a perfect segue into my next question. And this question is kind of a controversial question.
Okay.
Okay. And I want your rawest answer.
Okay. And if we don't get it, then we'll cut it, right?
I guess so. Are leaders made or are leaders born?
Woo! Thank you so much for tuning in to A Piece of Her. I have enjoyed this conversation, and I really, really hope that you have too. Please, 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 if you have not already subscribed to this page, make sure that you subscribe, like, follow, and share. Share. I know that you know someone that's in business, or maybe you want to be an author, you're an aspiring author that really needs to hear this. Make sure you're not stingy. Share.